Zuri was a happy woman. She lived in a small village where everyone knew her. She had beautiful dark skin and long, shiny hair that she loved. Zuri was married to Kofi, a man she thought would always love her. At first, their life together was wonderful. They laughed, played, and loved each other. But things started to change. Kofi began to act differently. Sometimes he would get very angry for no reason at all. He would yell at Zuri, and sometimes he would push her. Zuri didn't know why this was happening. She didn't want to make him even angrier, so she kept quiet. When he would hit her, she wouldn't tell anyone. She didn't want anyone to know the hurt she felt. At night, Zuri would lie in bed feeling the pain in her body. She didn't cry because she was afraid Kofi might get even more mad. But inside, she was very sad. She didn't know what to do. She didn't talk to her friends or family anymore. She stayed at home all the time. She started to feel alone and scared. People in the village noticed that Zuri wasn't the happy, cheerful woman she used to be. They started to ask, what happened to her? Zuri just smiled and said everything was okay, but deep inside she was hurt and confused. Zuri began to wonder why things were so hard. She used to be so full of life, but now she just felt broken. She didn't know who she was anymore. But one day, as Zuri looked at herself in the mirror, she asked, "Who am I becoming?" She didn't have the answer, but she knew that something had to change. Zuri felt something deep inside her. Maybe, just maybe, she could be strong and leave this pain behind. But would she be brave enough to do it? One day, Zuri's best friend Ada came to visit. Ada noticed that Zuri wasn't smiling like she used to. She could see the sadness in Zuri's eyes. Ada asked, "Zuri, what's wrong? Why aren't you happy anymore?" Zuri didn't want to tell her the truth. She was afraid people would think she was weak. But Ada wasn't like everyone else. Ada loved her and Zuri trusted her. So Zuri finally told Ada what was happening. "Kofi isn't the man he used to be," Zuri said, her voice shaking. "He hurts me sometimes, and I don't know why. I don't know what to do." Ada hugged Zuri and said, "You don't have to stay with him. You can be safe, Zuri. You don't deserve to be hurt. You're strong, and you can leave him." But Zuri was scared. She didn't know if she could leave. Kofi always told her that he loved her, even when he was hurting her. He would say sorry after every bad thing he did. Zuri didn't want to break up their family. She loved him, or at least she thought she did. Zuri started to cry. "What if I leave and no one loves me again?" she asked. "What if I can't find a way to be happy without him?" Ada looked at her kindly and said, "You can find happiness, Zuri. You don't have to be sad and hurt anymore. You deserve better." Zuri wasn't sure. The fear of leaving made her feel sick inside. But a tiny part of her started to hope. Maybe Ada was right. Maybe she could be happy again. Later that night, after Kofi went to sleep, Zuri sat on the floor, holding her knees. She thought about leaving. What if I could be strong? What if I could find a way to be happy again? But could she really do it? Could she leave the man she had once loved? The next few days felt like a cloud hanging over Zuri. She couldn't stop thinking about Ada's words. Could she really leave Kofi? Could she really be happy again? But at the same time, she was still so scared. Kofi had always promised that he loved her. And when he hurt her, he would apologize, making her believe he was sorry. But that night, everything changed. Kofi came home later than usual, his face angry and red. He had been drinking, and his words didn't make sense. He was shouting about things that didn't matter. Zuri tried to calm him down, but he got louder. And before she knew it, he was grabbing her arm and pulling her towards the wall. The pain was sharp. Zuri had no choice but to let out a cry. She didn't want to fight back. She didn't want to make him even angrier. But this time it was different. This time Zuri could feel something inside her snap. She felt broken and scared, but she also felt something else, a need to be free. Kofi didn't stop. He pushed her down, his face twisted in anger. Zuri hit the floor hard, feeling the pain everywhere. But this time, she didn't let him see her cry. This time she was done pretending everything was okay. Zuri stayed quiet while Kofi yelled. She couldn't take it anymore. She didn't know what to do, but she knew one thing for sure: she couldn't stay. She had to do something before she lost herself completely. As Kofi stormed off, Zuri sat on the cold floor, her body aching. She looked around the room. The walls felt like they were closing in. "I can't stay," she whispered to herself. But where would she go? How could she leave the life she knew? The night after the fight, Zuri couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart racing. She could still hear Kofi's angry voice echoing in her mind. It felt like her entire world was spinning. Zuri knew something had to change, but fear kept her locked in place. She was afraid to leave. What if Kofi followed her? What if he found her and hurt her even more? She couldn't even imagine the idea of being completely alone. But at the same time, staying meant the pain would never stop. She remembered Ada's words. "You don't have to stay, you're strong enough to leave." Zuri had never thought of herself as strong before. But in that moment, sitting in the dark, she felt something inside her stir. Could she really leave? The thought of walking away from everything she knew was terrifying. Zuri looked at her hands, still shaking from the last time Kofi touched her. She knew that she couldn't let it go on like this. She didn't want to feel weak anymore. She wanted to feel free. Zuri stood up and quietly walked to the window, looking outside at the dark village. The stars were shining, but all she could feel was the heavy weight of her choice. She thought about Ada's safe house, about the friends who cared for her. She knew they would support her. But could she really walk out of the house and leave it all behind? Just then, she heard the sound of Kofi's footsteps outside the door. He was back. Her heart started to race again. Zuri felt the fear rise in her chest. She quickly wiped away the tears, took a deep breath, and made a decision. Zuri grabbed her small bag, her heart pounding. She opened the door, taking one last look at the house where she had once felt safe. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered to herself. But as she stepped into the night, she heard Kofi's voice calling her name from behind. "Where do you think you're going?" Zuri's heart raced as she stepped outside, her mind screaming at her to run. The cool night air hit her face, but she could hardly feel it. All she could hear was her own breathing and the sound of Kofi's voice echoing in her ears. "Where do you think you're going?" Zuri froze for a moment, the fear gripping her chest like a tight hand. She turned slowly, her eyes wide, and saw Kofi standing in the doorway, looking angry. His face was red, his hands clenched into fists. For a split second, Zuri thought about turning back. What if he apologized? What if this was all just a misunderstanding? But deep down, she knew better. She couldn't stay. She couldn't let him control her anymore. Zuri took a deep breath and started walking faster, moving away from the house. Every step felt like a battle, but she was determined. This was her chance to escape, to be free. She couldn't let fear stop her now. But Kofi wasn't giving up. He started following her, his footsteps quickening behind her. Zuri's heart raced even faster, and she turned down a narrow path leading to Ada's house. She couldn't look back. She just had to keep going. She could hear Kofi calling her name louder now. "Zuri, stop, come back." But Zuri didn't stop. She couldn't stop. If she did, she'd never find the courage again. When she reached Ada's house, she knocked loudly, hoping Ada would hear her. She turned around to see Kofi still coming after her, getting closer with each step. Ada opened the door quickly, her eyes wide with concern. "Zuri, you made it," she said, pulling her inside. Zuri rushed in, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. Kofi reached the door just as Ada shut it, but he didn't try to push it open. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the door. Zuri's heart pounded in her chest as she listened to his heavy breathing from outside. She knew he wouldn't give up easily. As Ada locked the door behind them, Zuri sat down, trying to calm her breath. But just as she began to relax, she heard Kofi's voice again, this time from outside the window. "You can run, Zuri, but you'll always be mine." Zuri sat quietly in Ada's living room, her hands shaking as she tried to calm her breathing. The house felt safe, but the fear of Kofi finding her lingered like a shadow. Her heart still pounded, and her mind raced with thoughts of what would happen next. Ada made tea and sat beside her. "Zuri, you're safe now. Kofi can't hurt you here." But Zuri wasn't so sure. What if Kofi came for her? What if he found out where she was hiding? Her mind kept replaying the moment she had left him. She felt guilty, as if she had left something behind, but at the same time she knew she couldn't go back. Ada placed her hand on Zuri's. "You did the right thing. You took the first step to freedom." Zuri nodded, trying to believe it. She had never imagined her life would come to this. She had always been strong, the one who took care of everyone else. But now she felt small, fragile, like a piece of glass that might break at any moment. For the next few days, Zuri stayed with Ada, not daring to leave. She spent her time in the safety of Ada's home, trying to heal, both physically and emotionally. She thought about her life before Kofi. She remembered the dreams she had, the things she wanted to do, the places she wanted to go. But Kofi had stolen those dreams from her piece by piece with each beating and harsh word. One afternoon, Zuri looked out the window, staring at the village she had once called home. She wondered if anyone would understand why she left. Would they call her weak? Would they judge her for running away? But the more she thought about it, the clearer it became. She wasn't weak. She was brave. Zuri made a promise to herself that day. She would never go back to Kofi. She would rebuild her life, and she would never let him control her again. As Zuri sat by the window, feeling a small sense of peace, she suddenly heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. She walked to the door slowly, afraid it was Kofi. But when she opened it, no one was there, only a small envelope with her name written on it. Zuri stared at the envelope in her hands. Her heart raced. She hadn't heard from Kofi since she left, but now, this mysterious letter? What did it mean? The handwriting on the envelope was familiar, but her mind refused to believe it was from him. With trembling fingers, Zuri opened the envelope and pulled out the letter. Her eyes quickly scanned the words written inside. "Zuri, you can run, but I will always find you. You belong to me. Don't think you can escape. Come back and I'll make it all right. Please come back to me. You're all I have left." Zuri's hands shook as she read the letter again, her heart thudding in her chest. The letter was filled with desperation, but there was something more sinister about it too. Kofi wasn't just angry, he was controlling. He wanted her back, no matter what. Tears filled Zuri's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She had to be strong. She had to remember why she left in the first place. She had to stay away from him. Ada noticed the change in Zuri when she entered the room. "What's wrong, Zuri?" she asked gently. Zuri handed her the letter. Ada read it, her face hardening. "He's trying to manipulate you, Zuri. Don't let him win." But Zuri's fear was real. What if Kofi did find her? What if he hurt her again? The fear gnawed at her insides like a heavy weight. Could she keep running forever? Could she really be free? Ada saw the doubt in Zuri's eyes and sat beside her. "Listen, Zuri, he's playing games with your mind. He doesn't have power over you anymore." Zuri nodded, but a small voice inside her couldn't help but wonder. Was Ada right? Could she be safe? Or was Kofi going to come for her no matter where she went? That night, as Zuri lay in bed, she heard a noise outside the window. The soft shuffle of footsteps. Was it Kofi? Was he really here? Zuri held her breath, praying it wasn't him. But the footsteps grew louder. Then they stopped. Zuri stayed awake that night, listening closely to the silence. The footsteps outside her window had stopped, and for a while there was nothing. But she couldn't sleep. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and she was scared that Kofi was out there waiting for her to slip up. The next morning, Zuri sat in Ada's kitchen, trying to drink the warm tea that Ada made for her. But it tasted bitter, as if her worries were filling her up. The letter Kofi had sent was still sitting on the table. Zuri couldn't stop thinking about it. He had tried to break her once, and now he was trying to control her even from a distance. He didn't want to let go. Ada sat beside her, noticing the sadness in Zuri's eyes. "Zuri, I know you're scared. I can see it. But listen to me. You are strong. Kofi might try to control your mind, but he can't control your heart. You have more strength than you know." Zuri looked at Ada and nodded, though deep inside she was still unsure. She didn't feel strong. She felt fragile, like everything she had worked for could be torn apart in a moment. But Ada was right. Zuri had survived. She had escaped. That was strength. "You can do this," Ada said firmly. "You've already left him once. You've already broken free. Don't let fear control you now. You don't owe him anything." Zuri felt a spark of something deep inside her. Ada was right. She didn't owe Kofi anything. She had survived the abuse. She had run and she had found a way to rebuild. She was not the same woman she used to be. That night, as Zuri lay in bed, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about all the things she wanted for her future, things that had once seemed impossible. She didn't want to be defined by Kofi anymore. She wanted to be free, and so with newfound courage, Zuri made a promise to herself. "I will never go back to him. I will never let him break me again." The next morning, Zuri opened the door to find something waiting for her outside, a gift from Kofi. The note attached read, "I know you're scared. Come back and we can start over." Zuri stared at the note, her hands shaking. What would she do now? Zuri's heart raced as she stared at the note attached to the gift from Kofi. "I know you're scared. Come back and we can start over." The words were a twisted reminder of the man she had once loved. The gift, a beautiful necklace, seemed like a last attempt to hold on to the past. But the past was broken, and no piece of jewelry could fix that. Zuri had spent so many years believing Kofi could change, hoping that his love for her would be enough to stop the pain. But now, standing in the safety of Ada's home, she knew better. She couldn't go back. She couldn't let him control her anymore. Ada noticed Zuri staring at the necklace, her hands trembling. "Throw it away," Ada said softly. "It's just another chain around your heart. You don't need it. You've already taken the hardest step by leaving him." Zuri nodded, her eyes still on the necklace. Could she really walk away completely? The past was hard to forget, but it had been nothing but darkness. She walked to the trash and held the necklace in her hand for one last moment. The smooth metal felt cold against her skin, but it couldn't hold her anymore. She couldn't be tied down by the memories of Kofi's lies and cruelty. With a deep breath, she tossed the necklace in the trash, saying goodbye to the past. It was time to reclaim her life. But just as Zuri felt the weight of the world lifting off her shoulders, there was a loud knock at the door. Her stomach dropped. She didn't need to open it to know who it was. Kofi. Zuri stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear Kofi's voice from outside. "Zuri, please just listen. We can fix this. I love you. I can change. Come back to me, please." Zuri's mind raced, the memories of everything she had been through with him flashing in her mind, but she had already made her decision. There was no going back. Zuri's heart was pounding as she stood at the door, the weight of Kofi's words hanging heavy in the air. "I love you. I can change. Please come back to me." His voice was desperate, pleading. But Zuri knew the truth. She had heard those same words before, and they had never meant anything. Kofi's promises had always been empty. He had said he loved her, but love didn't break a person's spirit. Love didn't make someone fear for their life every single day. The door was still closed, but Zuri could feel him standing on the other side, waiting for her to make a choice. She could feel the tension in her bones, the pull to give in, the familiar feeling of guilt that had kept her silent for so long. But Zuri had broken free from that guilt. She had broken free from him. Zuri opened the door slowly, her face calm, her eyes unwavering. She didn't flinch. She didn't tremble. She stood tall, proud of the woman she had become. Kofi's face lit up with hope as he saw her, but when she looked him in the eyes, something inside her shifted. She was no longer the woman who was afraid of him. She was the woman who had left him behind. She didn't need him. She never had. Kofi stepped forward, reaching for her, but Zuri stepped back. She couldn't let him touch her again. She couldn't let him control her again. "I don't belong to you anymore," Zuri said quietly, her voice strong. "You may have broken my body, but you never broke my soul. I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'm free." Kofi's face twisted, his anger rising, but Zuri didn't flinch. She had nothing to fear anymore. This was her moment of victory. He took a step back, his eyes filled with rage, and Zuri knew this would be the last time she would ever see him. She was done with the fear. She was done with the hurt. "I don't need you," she whispered. "And I never did." Zuri turned and walked away from him, feeling the weight of the last years lift from her shoulders. For the first time in so long, she could breathe. She could live. Kofi called after her, his voice desperate. "I'll make you regret this, Zuri. You'll come crawling back." But Zuri didn't look back. She didn't need to hear any more of his lies. Her future was waiting for her, and it was bright. As Zuri walked away, a small smile played on her lips. She had made it. She had escaped the prison of fear. She was free, and nothing would ever take that away from her again. Physical abuse leaves deep scars, not just on the body but on the soul. It's a cycle of pain and control, where the victim feels trapped, afraid, and silenced. The fear of more violence makes them feel helpless, and their sense of self is eroded with every blow. But even in the darkest moments, the human spirit has the power to heal and rise above the pain, showing that freedom and strength are always within reach.